There is so much joy in becoming a parent, but it can take a village. Wouldn't it be nice if we had tools for postpartum and tips for building your village as a new parent? Well, stay tuned and hear from a California based perinatal therapist, Gayane Aramyan. Hi, welcome back to Project Parenthood. I am your host, Chelsea Dorsich, licensed marriage family therapist. I am here to join you on your conscious parenting journey, bringing more curiosity, openness, acceptance, kindness, and non judgment along the way. My goal is for us to accept what is out of our control, commit to improving our parenting life, and discover better outcomes for ourselves and our family. All right, so today's episode, I'm so excited to have on a very special, knowledgeable guest, Gayane Aramyan. She's an LMFT and she's a perinatal therapist based in Los Angeles. She specializes in helping women and couples through pregnancy, postpartum, and parenting. Her work has been featured in the Los Angeles Times, HuffPost, Women's Health, CNBC, and more. She's even been a guest on other podcasts, including Note to Self, I Love You So Much, and Off the Vine. And we are so grateful to have you here today, Gayane. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about all of these things.
Yeah, so I think what first comes to mind for me is just having postpartum therapy tools. I think just even being a mother myself and really having a license in marriage family therapy, just even those things sometimes don't really sink in. And to be a mother without those tools already in your repertoire, I think could be so overwhelming. So I would love to, hear what you put out there in the world when you talk postpartum therapy tools.
Yeah, and I totally relate in the sense that I was already a therapist, and even though, of course, I had some education about the perinatal world and therapy, and have just overall tools, I was just so confused and shocked by everything in the postpartum phase. I remember thinking, like, why isn't this something that we learn more about in school, right? Why isn't this something that we just, even without being a therapist, talk about more? So I think one of the main tools, if you can call it that, is to normalize and to discuss things that happen in the postpartum out loud instead of keeping it all internally. I think a lot of new moms feel shame for sharing out loud what their internal world is. But in reality, I think if we just talked about it, a lot of moms would be able to relate to each other, know that they're not alone, and then use each other as support.
Yeah, I agree. I think the normalizing just and getting that elephant out of the room, it's something that I think everyone experiences to a certain level. Even maybe it's not the same drastic as your friend or your neighbor, but we're all experiencing these things. And when we don't have that validation, it can be really make us insecure even more as a parent, and just wonder, like, what is wrong with me if I'm feeling these things. I agree that we just don't get enough validation out there.
Absolutely. And I think that we don't even get enough education about all things that can happen in the postpartum phase with your mental health, right? So I think one of my main passions is preparing for postpartum. So working with either, before conceiving or as they're expecting, working with either mom or the parents, and really talking about these different diagnoses that can happen, different perinatal anxiety and mood disorders that can happen, going through the symptoms, and not so much about the label, but really the symptoms, because I think the symptoms happen, and a lot of moms lack the education on the mental health aspect. And so when they're happening, they think something is wrong with them, or the opposite. They might think it's normal. They might think it's normal to stay up all night and watch your baby breathe. And although some worry is normal and expected because this is a whole brand new experience, staying up all night, I wouldn't call it normal, not normal. I wouldn't call it healthy. That's for sure. And so that's a symptom of postpartum anxiety that one should definitely seek help for, right? Because that is no way to enjoy, you can't enjoy all of it, but that is no way to enjoy any part of motherhood.
Absolutely. I agree that education is huge. And like you touched on in the beginning, just even as a therapist, this isn't even brought to our attention. We're so structured to work with the couples or the family as a whole, and even the individual, but this core piece. And I love that. Just to focus on the symptoms, because it doesn't have to be about the diagnosis, but just, okay, what are your symptoms? And like you said, is this allowing you to be a healthy and present parent, or is this allowing, or is this, how do you navigate this if these intrusive worries come up, that kind of thing. What have you seen in your practice, or what's usually coming to you of the most common kind of symptoms or challenges?
I would say postpartum anxiety is definitely on the rise. I would need to like back up the stats for that. But I mean, just in my practice, over the last 4 years, I want to say there's definitely a rise in those symptoms. And, I do believe that it has so much to do with our phones. And although it's a blessing to have all this information in our hands, it's also a curse to have all this information in our hands, and it's getting moms to overthink, to have way too many opinions, because you post on a Facebook moms group, you're getting like 5,000 responses versus like asking an actual village that once people lived in, and just the people surrounding. There's like now this overload of information. And so I definitely see an increase in anxiety. A lot of moms can experience, of course, postpartum depression. I think that's the one that's a little bit more talked about. But the anxiety, I don't think I personally had seen it be so publicly talked about, so I think that both definitely show up. I usually get the call 6 weeks postpartum. When they visit their OB and they have their 6 weeks checkup, and hopefully, and I get so happy when the OB actually asks the question of how are you doing. They'll have this conversation about seeking therapy, because either the mom is maybe crying really intensively and often, maybe she's feeling really low, maybe the intrusive thoughts are showing up to a point where she can't even hold her baby because she's scared. So all of these things are really, really common, I would say. And one of the other things that really shows up is the mom guilt, right?
Yes.
Guilt about maybe weaning breastfeeding, maybe not even breastfeeding, right? Choosing formula, guilt about sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, just every single thing you can think of. The guilt is very loud in this postpartum phase, and I want to say all throughout motherhood if you don't really work through it. I think, again, with all feelings, some guilt is totally okay to have, but when it's in the driver's seat, that's when we want to address it, because that's not helpful.
Absolutely, yes. We don't need it loud and overbearing to have that guilt. I agree. Definitely can always be a positive to some of those feelings. But I agree. I think that, like you said, just the fact that the OBs are referring these women out, and I think asking the right questions, and I think even just you speaking right now, it's allowing new moms to actually talk about those symptoms too, because I think that's probably has to be some of it too, is just even in putting out there to their OB when they're asking how are you, because for all they know, like, I guess I'm fine, I don't know, right? Like, unless they're actually talking about what's going on, and realizing that, okay, this is something that I can actually get help with. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be okay, kind of thing. Definitely the mom guilt too. I think I was thinking about too, just that the shoulds, like all that we should ourselves, like, oh, I should be better at this, or I shouldn't feel this way, or I imagine, do you get a lot of that in your practice too, just moms not feeling good enough?
Yeah, it's a lot of what society puts this image to be of the good enough mom or the perfect mom. And I'm sure you've seen those reels floating in social media of whether you're a working mom or stay-at-home mom, they'll judge. Whether you're breastfeeding or formula feeding, they'll judge. Whether you do this or that, they'll judge. Like, it's never good enough, no matter what you choose to do. And so I think the pressure is really, really high. And that's another reason why we're seeing such a rise in perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, is because I hate to blame it, but I do think it's the social media.
Yeah.
and the expectations that the world has around women, moms, and everything you should get done, and this pressure of schools and developmental stuff, and sleep
Mhm.
training, not sleep training, baby led weaning, not like there's just so much. And your doctor
Right.
says one thing, internet says something else, your mom says something else, your mother-in-law says something else, and you're just like, what do I do?
Which way do I go? Yes.
Right, right. And so it
Yeah,
adds a lot
absolutely.
of pressure.
Mhm. I agree. I do agree with you with we're seeing so much of that, the impact of social media and just I mean, it's not just, we worry about our teens and our kids, but it's new moms too. They feel it too. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if for the partners too, like I know you work with couples too, and just, how do you usually encourage or give recommendations or tools even for the partners to support the mom that's going through postpartum symptoms?
So again, ideally, I'm working with them while they're expecting and not already
Okay.
while they're in the thick of it. And so if
Right.
I get that privilege of working with a couple while they're expecting, then we really start working on the current patterns or negative cycles that they might be stuck in, and learning healthy coping tools and more assertive ways of speaking to each other. And a lot of couples and just individuals, I think, we didn't grow up with those tools. And so a lot of adults now
Mhm.
struggle with how to communicate more assertively and speak kindly and still ask for, validate each other's differences of opinions, talk about your needs. We weren't given the
Right.
tools on how to do that in a kind and loving way. And so we will do that in our sessions. I will provide sometimes even scripts, and I'll say, I know this sounds silly, but we're going to follow a script and we're going to learn how to be an active listener. And the other person
Mhm.
gets to speak, and you just get to listen, which is, I feel like, a tool that we don't have how to listen.
Right.
So we'll do that, and then as they get closer to their due date, we'll start talking about what it's going to look like in the postpartum phase. And so again, we'll talk about the possible symptoms that mom may experience, but also dad may experience, because postpartum depression happens to dads as well.
Right.
And so we will discuss potentially how each person can show up for each other. I've had a couple one time put post-it notes around the house with positive affirmations about each other,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it said like things like, this too shall pass, remember I'm on your side, I love you, things like that. And so
Right.
they had that around the house, and they came back to me after I think 1 week postpartum, and they were saying how helpful it was, because it's so easy to just start feeling like you're against each other in that time. And so
Yep.
those were great reminders for them.
Yeah, definitely. Because just even as the strongest couples, those relationship gets definitely through a whirlwind when a new being and
Absolutely.
responsibility. Yeah, it's so amazing to see just personally and just with our clients the shift of yeah how that can happen. I love that. That's such a great tool and like even coping like a preventative proactive measurement to do or just to be able to put little post-its and make it personal positive affirmation a way for them to connect and kind of show up for
Yeah.
each other.
Absolutely. And of course, I definitely encourage that they stay in therapy, their individual therapies,
Mhm.
even in the postpartum phase, because I think that it's really important to stay consistent and process all the changes that are happening. I also talk about ways that the couple can connect, even
Mhm.
in this chaotic period of time. Lack of
Yeah.
sleep, lack of possible help, and we talk about these beforehand, because sometimes, people don't have that village around them, and
Right.
they might have to budget to hire help. And so talking about it way before gives them the time to maybe not order takeout five days a week, and maybe put some money aside for possible help afterwards. That's just an example of that. But really to start
Right.
thinking about it, right? Because I think that people get to the postpartum phase and then they realize they don't have the help, and then financially they can't get the help because they weren't prepared for it.
Absolutely, yeah, and just even not realizing maybe they would need help, right? So just to think of those things ahead of time, because
Yes.
like you said, once you're in the thick of it, yeah, we're not reacting, or we are reacting instead of maybe responding more um,
Yeah.
cautiously, yeah, just to what all these different variables that come up. So speaking of village, I know that's something that you work a lot with too, is when you are a new parent, just building that village around you.
Yes, I truly believe thinking about this village, if you don't have maybe immediate family around or friends that can help, I think it's about thinking of what could be possible for you and your new family. Oftentimes, people don't think of, oh, maybe the neighbor that I've known and loved for the last 10 years, maybe I could just ask and see what they say, right? Or maybe there's another new couple that we're friends with and they have a new baby, and maybe we can somehow arrange going over there and being with two babies sleeping or something like that, and just having each other's back in some way.
Right.
There's different ways to create that support. Joining mommy and me or parent and me classes, parent and baby classes. And then if you are pre-planning and financially it's possible, thinking about these costs ahead of time and budgeting it into your financial plan. And a lot of times, people don't realize, for example, lactation consultants, one that I work very closely with, and by the time when I was using her as my own lactation consultant, she wasn't covered by insurance, but now she's completely covered. All her sessions, unlimited sessions, are covered. And so that's not something that most people know, that this service can be actually covered if you have this insurance. And I think that's, again, something that needs to be talked about. A lot of people also don't know what purpose each resource can serve. And so I've spent time to create a preparing for postpartum workbook that I have on my website. And in there, I have a list of different resources and how each resource can show up. Because a lot of times people will say, well, what am I going to need a night nanny for? Like, what is a night nurse for? Right. And
Right.
so, and again, it's kind of that maybe we lie to ourselves and tell ourselves, I got it, I'll figure it out. It's fine. I usually don't sleep. I'm going to be okay. And my job is to say, okay, sure, that could be true. But in the case we are struggling, let's have already a number in place, someone you've already talked to, maybe while you were pregnant, someone you've already saved up for. So when you are in the thick of it and you feel like you need the help, you already have a person you can call.
Right. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I love that you have that online, just that book of resources, because you're right. I think sometimes you don't realize what you need until you have the child, and if we aren't talking about it, like you said, to be able to have that contact and reach out to someone ahead of time and you'll be more, I'm assuming, more inclined and feel more comfortable to actually reach out at that point of the need. So you feel like, okay, I already kind of
Absolutely.
built that rapport. I've already built that expectation that I may need help. And yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And
so
I
amazing.
believe that there is a resource. I don't remember the name, but I've heard of this website where instead of having like a baby list registry, where people can
Mhm.
buy products, they can buy services for the expecting
Wow.
mom and parents. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will have to look up the name, but there is something like that, which I think is wonderful.
Oh, that's so amazing. Yes, especially when I think you think about when you're on your second or third, and sometimes, you're reusing everything that's like the perfect registry. Like, cause you're like, okay, one I could
Yeah,
handle now, two, maybe that's a different
yeah.
ball game. Yeah,
Yeah, and you
definitely. I
can
love that. Really.
select, I think, you can select, what service you need maybe the help with, or I believe people can, will have to see what it is, but there is something like that. And I just think that's absolutely amazing because, what better gift than to have the extra help and to be taken care of? I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering too, in terms of the village, I know even if, let's say, a new parent has like the immediate family or extended family around, or, maybe do you give them kind of tools or ways to kind of set that expectation up, like, or just to kind of set that lifeline up, I guess?
That's a great question. And I was going to say the other part of this is not just either having the village or
Mhm.
hiring the village, it's about asking, knowing how to ask for help.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
hear that a lot of times where clients will have family around, family who is more than willing to help, but they will feel shame, guilt,
Mhm.
and not have the tools on how to ask for that help. And again, that goes back, it's a systemic issue, right? We have this expectations that women should just do it all, and we don't need help, and we're independent. And while that's
Mhm.
great, we have to remember that it takes a village to raise kids.
Right.
We're not meant to do this alone.
Right.
You know, they had actual villages back then, and now we have kind of an isolated feel to motherhood because
Mhm.
even if we have, like, I'm very blessed and lucky that I do have family living nearby, but it's still not like in my building. You know, it's not like
Right.
next door. Like my mom still has to take the freeway to come to me, and my mother-in-law lives a little bit closer, but there's other moving parts where it's not just like
Right.
next door or in your same house, which that's how things used to be. And so we don't have that immediate access for help, which means there's an
Mhm.
added layer, and you actually have to ask for help. You have to
Right.
say, Mom, could you please pick up my son today? Mom, could you please come over so we can go out? Mom, like, you have to be vocal. And I
Right.
find that a lot of clients struggle with this piece of being assertive, of asking for help because they fear rejection. They fear that,
Mhm.
the person might say no. They fear that the person is going to judge them, that they can't do it all.
Yep.
And they feel guilt for wanting to take care of themselves. Let's say, if it's for, let's say, going out or even for work, right? They feel guilt that they're not going to be with their baby. And
Right.
so there's a lot of layers that really, I think, affect moms, for those that even have the help around, to even ask for that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I see that so much too. And it's just the fear, like you said, you nailed it, like fear of rejection, being judged, um, even feeling weak, right? That you should be this, yeah, the shoulds again. Will you do like actual, like, I know you mentioned the scripts earlier with connecting with your partner, but is this something where you also do like either role plays or just have them practice asking? Or is there any ways, like maybe listeners at home, like if they're already in that stage where they're expecting and
Yeah.
like, okay, I need to start working on this village?
Absolutely. I think mental rehearsal is really
Mhm.
powerful. And I think the more you get yourself, even, if it's role playing or you're standing in front of a mirror and you're saying this, or you're typing it out somewhere, get your mind comfortable with even this language, with this kind of language. And I think that it's also important to know that, the person who you're asking is allowed to say no. They do have
Mhm.
their own lives, and it's okay if they say no, because that doesn't mean it's a no forever. It just means that the day
Right.
might not work for them. And if you know that they're more than willing to help, like, it's okay to ask for that again.
Mhm.
And if guilt shows up, I think that's a different, I would give a different coping tool with that, because I think that the guilt can really get in the driver's seat and prevent you from even asking, to then be afraid of the rejection. Um,
Yeah.
so I think when guilt shows up, I often have clients really identify that and notice that that part is even showing up, and kind of, if we're using this bus metaphor, if it's in the driver's seat, let's have it go back to the passenger seat where it should be,
Right.
right? Like, all of our emotions can have a seat in the passenger seat, but you, the self,
Mhm.
is in the driver's seat. And so you
Right.
can just acknowledge, and that shows up. I mean, even personally, I have a busy few days of work, and today I had to ask my mother-in-law to pick him up. And these, usually when I have back-to-back work days like this, I get that guilt of like, oh, I want to
Yeah.
be with him and I miss him. And this morning when I
Mhm.
dropped him off, I gave him a hug, and I do have that guilt too, but I'm not
Right.
letting the guilt take over to a point where I'm not going to work or I'm cutting
Right.
my hours, because this is
Yes.
also a huge part of who I am, and it gives me so much joy, and I love working and I love what I do. And so I notice that it's there, but I'm not going to let it be in control.
I love that. And I love the bus analogy. I like to use that when I talk about family values, and that those are,
Yes.
the bus is headed towards your valued life. And I love that, yes, because the reality is we're going to have all those emotions. We're not trying to
Yeah.
kick them off the bus. We're giving them a different seat. It doesn't have to be front and center. I love that. And it's so true. Any stage of parenthood, it's going to show up. And as long as we recenter ourselves, like you said, like this work makes you happy. I feel the same way. It's the mom guilt, parent guilt. But yeah, just to be able to, I love that, the mental rehearsal, and to be able to either write it out or practicing in the mirror, just to get comfortable with even that task and being okay with them saying no. Because like you said, doesn't mean that they don't want to, they just might not be able to. And to be able to say, yeah, okay, maybe there's another day, or will this other day work better? Yeah, I love that. Just that it's so interesting that just asking for help can be so laborious for us, just so intimidating, just to,
Well,
yeah,
because
go
it
to
wasn't modeled, right? I don't think we saw that happen, and maybe because it was family was just near and available to help. Maybe because, I know my mom didn't work and she was a stay-at-home mom, and so not that she didn't need help, but it looked different. And so
right.
also she didn't have the demands of being a modern day parent. And even with school and the different million tasks we have to do for school and the different appointments and keeping the mental load of a modern day parent is just not the same of that generation, of our parents' generation. Not to say they didn't have it hard, of course they did in their own ways, but we have it a little bit, I don't know. I do believe it's
It looks
difficult.
different. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It is. It's the extracurriculars. That's just where we are right now. Our kids are, of all ages, are completely busier than they ever were in the past, or we were in the past.
Our worries are just so much more that even my own, my mom, my mother-in-law, they'll both say, like, both of our parents will say, the things that you guys have to think about now, like, we didn't think of that.
Right.
All these guidelines, like, they didn't think, and I think we turned out okay.
Yeah.
But now we have
Weird.
overload of information, and so that's definitely really hard.
Yeah. So I imagine that's definitely a piece of it, just being able to filter that overload of information and be able to focus on the important. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else that kind of stands out that maybe we didn't get to touch on yet, just for listeners, for expecting or new parents are about to be, or thinking about conceiving? Like you said, it can be in all stages.
I would say to do the work before you're in the thick of it. I truly believe in that. I don't think you can guarantee a successful postpartum period, but I do believe that you can do things to better prepare for it. And you can minimize the risk of, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders of happening. You can have better tools going into it. And I do believe that doing your own work before getting into this phase of life is really important.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that was one of the best things. And I might have felt safer being a therapist, but just having that workload before becoming a parent and realizing what can actually, just between intergenerational things and, just like you said, systemic things that come up. But yeah, I love that. Just being able to have those tools in your toolbox, be better prepared. We can't predict or prevent a storm, but we can be better prepared for it. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. And let's let listeners know how they can find more resources from you or reach out to you.
Thank you so much for having me. You can find me on my Instagram at Therapy with Gayane, or on my website, therapywithgayane.com.
Thank you so much, Gayane. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
That's it for this week's edition of Project Parenthood. Remember to be curious, open, accepting, kind, and non-judgmental on your conscious parenting journey. If you have any questions about this episode, about your parenting journey, and/or topics you'd like to hear more about, please reach out to parenthood@quickanddirtytips.com or leave a message at 646-926-3243. Project Parenthood is a Quick and Dirty Tips podcast. Thanks to the team at Quick and Dirty Tips, Holly Hutchings, Davina Tomlin, Morgan Christensen, and Brennan Getchus. May you be happy, safe and protected, healthy and strong, and live with ease.